Turns out these rookies can hit. Dylan Beavers, Samuel Basallo, and of course, Trevor Rogers lead the Orioles to a win over the Red Sox. Can the O's really afford to sit Basallo at all? We'll talk about that coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Tuesday, August 19th, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles' 6-3 victory over the Boston Red Sox on Monday night. Get to the 5 things you need to know from that one, including another just fantastic start from Trevor Rogers, a big day for Basallo and Beavers, and Jordan Westburg leaving with another injury. We'll talk a bit about what the Orioles would do if Westburg has to go back on the injured list, what they would do at third base if it's Jeremiah Jackson's time, or if Kobe Mayo could move back across the diamond. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about Basallo. He's hitting so well. He caught for the first time on Monday. How are the Orioles going to kind of rotate him and fit him into the lineup every night when you want to get your at-bats for the guys like Rutschman, Mayo, and Mountcastle as well? But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now. So let's start with another Orioles win after they took a series over the Mariners, then took a series on the road over the Astros. They win game 1 of 2 at Fenway against the Red Sox on Monday night. Final score from that one, the Orioles 6 and the Boston Red Sox 3 in game 1 of kind of a weird 2-game series. But the Orioles are back to single-digit games under 500. They sit at 58 and 67 on the season. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from this Oriole win. And the first thing you need to know is Trevor Rogers just simply cannot be stopped right now. Rogers goes out there. He's an ace. He is a legitimate ace right now of the Orioles in Major League Baseball. Who knows if that continues into 2026? We will see. But right now, he is one of the best starting pitchers in the majors, full stop. It cannot be argued by the results he is putting up. Another 7 innings of 1-run ball for Rogers on 4 hits. He struck out 7 Boston hitters and walked just 1 on 98 pitches. It's now a 1.41 ERA for Rogers through 12 starts this season, and that is a new Orioles record for the lowest ERA through the first 12 starts of a season for an Orioles pitcher. The previous record held by Hoyt Wilhelm, who had a 1.50 ERA in his first 12 starts in 1959. Jim Palmer's best ever start was a 1.69 ERA in 1975. Trevor Rogers is at 1.41. Just astounding what he's been able to do. And since Rogers was called up for the first time to start against the Red Sox in that doubleheader on May 24th, when he threw 6 1/3 scoreless, among pitchers who've thrown at least 60 innings in that time, Rogers' 1.41 ERA is by far the best. You got to look at Matthew Boyd with like a 1.8 something, has been the second best guy in that stretch. And for Rogers, 11 of his 12 starts, he's allowed 2 earned runs or less. The only one that he didn't was that second start, that muggy night in Tampa, when he didn't even get out of the 3rd inning and allowed 3 runs. But it's 10 consecutive starts for Rogers allowing 2 earned runs or less. That also ties an Orioles record for the longest stretch doing that. Milt Pappas in 1964 also allowed 2 runs or less in 10 consecutive starts. And it's incredible what he's doing. And honestly, there was a little bit more swing and miss for Rogers on Monday night. He got 15 whiffs in this game, but they were really spread out. It's not like one of his 5 pitches was really dominating. He got anywhere between 2 and 5 whiffs on all 5 of his different pitch types on Monday night. Now, he did throw more sinkers than usual. It's mostly been kind of 4-seamer, changeup, sinker, but his sinker was his number 1 pitch. So maybe some more lefties in the Red Sox lineup, going to throw more sinkers to those guys, but he dotted both fastballs all night. The velo was a little bit down, but that didn't really matter. And the one blemish really was the 7th inning. He walked Alex Bregman on 5 pitches to lead off the 7th. Bregman ended up scoring on an RBI double in that inning to make it a 4-1 game, but he scored on a sac fly, I believe. Yeah, it was a nice catch by Cowser out in the gap. And then Rogers got a strikeout of Rafaela to end the inning, keep it 4-1, strand a couple of runners there and end his day. And that was it, right? His one walk comes around to score, and it's a leadoff walk, and it wasn't a very competitive at bat. Like the 3-1 sinker to Bregman was like a foot outside. You could tell he was mad at himself. He locked back in, still allowed the run, but it's just tremendous what he's doing. Like, I almost feel like, yeah, he's doing, tiny things differently every start. Like, he didn't throw as many sweepers. He threw way more traditional sliders on Monday. So that was a little different. The more sinkers was a little bit different. So he's tweaking things every start to keep the hitters guessing. But overall, it's just all the deception from the arm angle and the pitch mix and the amount of strikes he is throwing. There's not much more I can say every time he goes out there than just, he's incredible. And I'm going to try to do, it's either going to come in the offseason or later this year, like a full breakdown of everything Rogers has changed to make him this good. But he legitimately, 12 starts, he's been the best starting pitcher in Major League Baseball. No one could have even dreamed, not even Rogers himself, that it would be this good when he returned to the majors in 2025. Second thing you need to know from Monday's win is that Gunnar Henderson hit a very angry home run to open the scoring in this one. Had a little dust up in the bottom of the second. Trevor Story on the Orioles getting a force out at second base on a flip from Holiday to Henderson. Slid wide of the bag, kind of slid right into Gunnar's foot. It was a legal slide because Story was on the ground and he was still touching the base, but Gunnar wasn't too happy with it, and he has a right to feel that way. So he came up in the next half inning in the third, and he took his anger out on a fastball from Dustin May, crushing it 408 feet to dead center field, just to the right of the monster, 108 off the bat for a solo home run to give the Orioles a 1-0 lead. His 15th of the season was also his third home run in the month of August. Now, we are more than halfway through, but Gunner's had no more than 4 homers in any month this season. Of course, it's been a power outage, right? He hit 37 bombs last year. We're in mid-August, and he's only got 15. I think he'll get to 20, but not much further than that. But he's on a better home run pace in this month. Also had an RBI double later in the game to add to the lead. He continues to swing the bat incredibly well and look like the Gunnar that we know and love. And you got to shout him out for this too. I mean, he made some awesome defensive plays at shortstop on Monday night. It almost seemed like every inning he was making a spinning, off balance, great throw. Like that was one of the best career games defensively for Gunnar at shortstop as well. That was really, really nice to see. Also, because he doesn't grade out super well at that position, but we know he has the skills, and he certainly showed them on Monday night. Third thing you need to know from this one is that it was another night of firsts for the Orioles' new rookies. Third career game for Dylan Beavers, who was called up on Saturday. Second career game for Samuel Basallo, called up on Sunday. They were both in the lineup, and it was the first time catching for Basallo in the big leagues. He was the DH in the lineup on Sunday, got his first big league hit, but he was behind the plate to catch Trevor Rogers. Now, that was probably intentional. As Tony Mansolino said, he'll DH again on Tuesday, but Basallo did catch Trevor Rogers earlier this season in AAA Norfolk, so he knew how to work with him. And you could tell, right, the receiving skills still need a little bit of work, the framing. It was actually funny. He dropped the very first pitch of the game, which was still a called strike. He didn't, he dropped a couple other balls, didn't present the best target in the world, but I thought he passed the first test. Now, nobody really ran on him. We didn't get to see the arm come out, but he was solid enough back there. The pitch calling, which Mansolino talked about, he definitely needs to learn at the big league level, seemed good because he already had a relationship with Rogers, and you love to see that. And then he added to it because in the fourth inning, Basallo doubled off the monster to lead off the inning, came around to score his first career extra base hit. It was very much a Fenway double high off the monster, but he certainly showed off the opposite field power right there. And then he followed it up with really the crushing blow, which ended up being a huge swing. Came up with runners on second and third and 2 outs in the ninth, and lined a 2-run single into right center field to put the Orioles up 6-1, 108.3 off the bat on another high fastball, same kind of pitch he got his first career hit on in Houston on Sunday. And, it went from a 4-1 to a 6-1 game in the ninth. Didn't seem super important. Then after the Orioles, things got a little shaky in the bottom of the ninth. It ended up being a gigantic swing for the O's. And then you go to Dylan Beavers, who, after Basallo doubled in the fourth, Beavers brought him home with his first RBI on a single, got the green light on a 3-0 pitch, got a fastball center cut, and ripped it into center field for an RBI base hit to put the O's up 2-0. And then Beavers kind of quietly after that, they didn't get him out. Beavers went 2 for 2, 2 singles, 2 walks, and an RBI in this game. Have a great start to his big league career. Like, you get on base all 4 times in your third big league game. That is pretty special. And that is exactly what Beavers did. Also got the start in right field and looked good out there. Fourth thing you need to know from this one is that the Orioles bullpen, well, they did the job behind Trevor Rogers. Dietrich Enns comes into the game in the bottom of the eighth, protecting a 4-1 lead, and he does what Dietrich Enns does, goes 1-2-3 in the eighth inning. Now, he came back out to face the lefty in the ninth, did allow a leadoff single, and then came out of the game. He was over 20 pitches, and Tony Mansolino went to Yennier Cano. But now, Cano did allow that inherited runner to score, so for Enns now in an Orioles uniform, he's still been great. 9 1/3 innings, 10 hits, 3 runs, 16 Ks to 3 walks has just been outstanding. Yennier Cano, not so much lately. Now, his last outing, that was the scoreless eighth inning in a tie game on Saturday night in Houston. He was awesome. He's throwing his new sweeping slider. He looked great. Didn't really look great in this one. Eventually got the third out, but did allow 2 runs to score that allowed the Red Sox to get the tying run into the on-deck circle there with 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth. Even got a little help on a 3-1 pitch for that final ground out to end the game. Not nearly as sharp in this one. There are still some worries about Cano, but at least he got the 3 outs he needed to get to secure this Oriole win. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 6-3 win over the Boston Red Sox on Monday night to open up this quick series is that Jordan Westburg left this game with injury. Came out of the game in the first inning after rounding second base a little awkwardly and then limped off the field. Luis Vasquez, the Orioles bench infielder, came in to play third base and actually had a big hit. He doubled to lead off the ninth to start that Oriole 2-run rally. Just his third career hit, his second with the Orioles, and his first big league extra base hit. So a cool moment there for Vasquez. But the greater concern was on Westburg. And even with the awesome win, great start from Rogers, more from Basallo and Beavers coming off, the great weekend in Houston, it just feels like that's what's happened in this 2025 season for the Orioles and for Orioles fans. We can't have too many days in a row of good feelings. Something has to punch us in the gut. And that was the Jordan Westburg injury on Monday. So coming up next, we'll talk about the potential severity for Westburg and what it would mean for the O's if he has to miss some time here with another injury in 2025. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. Now, obviously, Lamar Jackson will win MVP, but maybe a little better value is Derrick Henry in the MVP race. And maybe the Ravens aren't great value to win the Super Bowl, but who else are you going to pick at this point? So visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. And it's at FanDuel. Play your game. So the Orioles got the big 6-3 win on Monday night against the Boston Red Sox, playing some good baseball at the moment. Honestly, this Orioles team is, after really struggling coming off the sell-off at the deadline. But as this Orioles season is gone, we can't get some good stuff without some bad stuff. And the bad stuff was Jordan Westburg leaving with an injury. He reached base in the top of the first on a fielder's choice. And then on a Ryan Mountcastle single, he was thinking about going first to third. And then kind of as he got closer to second, realized he wanted to put on the brakes and stay at second base. But it was very odd watching the replay. Like when he tried to plant with his left leg to turn the corner, it almost looked like the dirt gave out from under him, which you rarely see. Like I'd never really seen an injury like that. And then because of that, his right foot coming down was unstable and his right foot basically landed awkwardly and rolled. He was able to get back to second base safely. Trainer came out, looked at him. He tried to run into the outfield a couple of times, started shaking his head no, and limped off the field and left the game with Luis Vasquez replacing him as a pinch runner and then defensively at third base for the remainder of the game. Now, Tony Mansolino said after the game that the Orioles think Jordan Westburg's ankle injury is mild, and Mansolino said they will know more here on Tuesday. So probably when Mansolino speaks to the media Tuesday afternoon in Boston before Tuesday's game, we'll get a further update, and I'll certainly have that for you on Wednesday's episode. But it makes you worry because Westburg, he came in 9 for his last 19. Like he's been tremendous. He had the incredible month of July where he went out there and just destroyed the baseball with a 927 OPS. He's cooled off a little bit in August, but he's still been really good. And he's just huge for this team. And this is a guy who has already missed significant time. He had a hamstring injury, had a couple of finger issues this year, of course, missed 6 weeks last year with the broken hand after getting hit by a pitch. And some of those have been freak injuries, certainly, but other ones like the hamstring are a little bit concerning for Westburg. And now it is what the Orioles called right ankle discomfort when he left the game on Monday. And you're just hoping if it is some sort of ankle sprain, it's something that's mild. Again, Mancelino's saying the Orioles think it's mild. Hopefully it's just a day-to-day thing. I really don't think there's any chance he plays on Tuesday, but the Orioles do have the off day on Wednesday before coming home Thursday. So maybe he could be back in the lineup by then, which would be nice. So you hope everything structurally is fine in that Westburg ankle, and he is day-to-day because he's just so important for this Orioles offense. But also, if he has to miss time, he has to miss time. You're prioritizing him being healthy, good to go for 2026 when the Orioles go back at this thing. So whether it's day-to-day or he goes on the IL, it's probably seeing more Jeremiah Jackson. Now, it's funny because we've only seen Jackson either in the outfield or DHing like he was doing on Monday night. And of course, how about Jeremiah Jackson just continues to get knocks? He had 2 more hits on Monday. He's hitting 341 since the Orioles called him up. But he is more so learning the outfield. He played it in the minor leagues, but he came up and was drafted as an infielder. And, he played third base right at the end of the game on Sunday just to get an inning there. But that would probably be his position to take. I mean, I know Kobe Mayo came up as a third baseman, and that would make it much easier. We're going to talk about in a bit how the Orioles fit in all these guys at first base, catcher, and DH. If Westburg was out for a bit and Mayo moved back over to third base, that's the easiest way to get him in the lineup. It would still get him more work at that position when it doesn't matter as much. So that's certainly a possibility. But I do think at this point, the Orioles just see Kobe Mayo as their long-term first baseman who can, play third base in an emergency situation. But Westburg went out and Mayo was not in the lineup on Monday. So Mancelino easily could have put Mayo in there, and instead he went to Luis Vasquez. So that tells you a little bit about what they think about Mayo and his defense. It's been rough at third. That's why he's kind of moved over to first base full time now. So it's a possibility. It would make that whole thing easier, but I think it's more likely that Jeremiah Jackson, who just what he did in the minors, a better defensive third baseman than Mayo is, and a guy they want to get into the lineup, gives him an easy way to get everyday at bats. It makes it unfortunate because then there's a little bit more of an opening in the outfield again, right? You're seeing Beavers, Cowser, and Dylan Carlson in the outfield every day then. And you would love if one of those, Mountcastle, Basallo, Mayo, whomever could play the outfield, or Mayo moving to third base. I just don't know if it's going to happen if the Orioles are going to do that. Again, if he is day-to-day, right, he'll stay on the roster. If he does have to go on the injured list, you would think, an infielder goes down, the O's would call up an infielder. That's probably not going to be the case because right now, they really only have 3 true outfielders on the roster in Cowser, Beavers, and Carlson. And then Jeremiah Jackson is kind of operating as the 4th outfielder on this roster. But if Westburg goes on the IL and Jackson kind of takes over third base, he's now an infielder, not an outfielder. You would absolutely have to add another outfielder to the roster. And so most likely Daniel Johnson would probably get recalled to rejoin the team just to be a bench outfielder to have on the roster if you're not really going to be able to use Jackson in that spot. We will see. Hopefully it is something minor for Jordan Westburg because he's just such a big part of this offense. And I know, even with the Orioles playing better, it's the wins and losses aren't mattering as much down the stretch. It's not like, oh no, if they miss Westburg for 2 weeks, going to take them out of the playoffs. They're not in the playoffs to begin with. And health for 2026 is the most important thing, but it's still important for him to get into a groove for the remainder of this season. He certainly got into a groove in July, which was great to see, but you want to see that continue in any kind of injury like this, even though it's not something that should, require surgery or be long-term or anything like that we know as of now. It's still a setback in his season. One of many for many Orioles players this year. It's just another frustrating thing as things were seeming to tip in the right direction. And then boom, uppercut to the chin. Jordan Westburg injured again. We hope for the best, and we'll have more updates on tomorrow's episode. But I kind of already alluded to it a bit. Samuel Basallo's hitting. Kobe Mayo might not move over to third base if there's an opening. How are the O's going to play this? They've kind of got 4 players for 3 spots right now, and it'll be interesting to see, what Tony Mancelino's already said, what's been written, and what they've shown with their lineup so far. How will they figure all this out and get a guy like Basallo into the lineup every day? We'll break that down to finish off the pod coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Now, preseason already heating up, and college football, it's not far behind. So whether you got your eye on big name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in the game. For me, I log on to Prize Picks every week. I say I'll take the more on Lamar Jackson. I'll take the more on Derrick Henry. And Prize Picks is simple to play. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. And if you get your picks right, you could cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. And that's all at Prize Picks. Run your game. So we finish off today's episode with a look at the potential Samuel Basallo playing time, right? It's only been 2 games, but he's caught, he's DH'd, and he's looked awesome at the plate in those 2 games, and the Orioles 2-0 in the Samuel Basallo era so far. But there is a question, it's already been talked about by Tony Mansolino, about how the Orioles are going to fit these guys in. Because let's assume, and I think this is going to be the case, that even if Jordan Westburg goes on the IL, Coby Mayo is not going to move over to third base full time. Let's just live in a situation where that's not the case. Maybe he plays there a little bit, but he's mostly going to stick at first base and DH. It's crowded. And even if Westburg misses a little bit of time, he's going to be back and crowded up again. So it's still a question you're going to have to answer. You have Adley Rutschman, Samuel Basallo, Ryan Mountcastle, and Coby Mayo. Again, theoretically, Mayo could also play third base. But otherwise, those are all guys who are basically shunned to either catcher, first base, or DH. Adley, catcher and DH, Basallo, all 3, and then Mountcastle and Mayo, just first base and DH. And those are only 3 spots in the lineup, catcher, DH, and first base, but 4 guys you probably want to get in there. And that's why it's just a little bit of a conundrum for Mike Elias, Tony Mansolino, and the Orioles right now. Now, so far, Basallo was the DH Sunday. He caught Monday, and Mansolino's already said he will DH again here on Tuesday night. Now, for Dylan Beavers, this is not an issue, right? Like the outfield's wide open. It's going to be Beavers and Cowser out there most days, then some Carlson and some Jackson, depending on the injury severity of Jordan Westburg. Maybe Beavers sits against a few lefties, but otherwise he's going to be out there. But none of these other guys play outfield. So one of them's going to have to sit, you would think. Now, against lefties, I'm pretty certain they're going to get Coby Mayo and Ryan Mountcastle in the lineup at first base and DH every day, at least for now. Now, against lefties, you probably want Adley in there as well. So that might be a time where Basallo might just sit against a few lefties, at least early in his career. But I'd also like Samuel Basallo to play against some big league lefties. And even if it doesn't go well in the final 6 weeks of this season, get that experience facing left-handers so he can kind of get himself ready for next year when hopefully he's an everyday player and he is facing a lot of good lefties. Now, if the O's are facing a right-handed pitcher, I want Basallo in there. Whether it's catcher, first base, DH, doesn't matter. I want him in the lineup. And I would, although Mountcastle did play on Monday night with Mayo sitting and Mountie continued to stay hot. He went 3 for 5 with an RBI in Monday night's game, and he's been really good since coming off the IL with that hamstring issue. You know, Tony Mansolino talked about it. Andy Koska had a story about it in the Baltimore Banner on Monday. Like, Mansolino's always already talked to Mountcastle about how his playing time was going to be mostly DH and was going to go down more when Basallo got here. And it seems like Mountcastle is bought in. He kind of understands his spot on the team and the place the team is in with being out of it and wanting to get these young guys these playing times. But Mansolino said it, right? Like, Beavers and Basallo are here to play. Mayo's here to play. Like, they're going to get these guys these at-bats. So I think Mountcastle against some righties is going to sit, and they're, you know, they could certainly use him as a pinch hitter against a lefty reliever later in the game. Like, he'll still come off the bench and play a little bit, but, you know, the Adley catching, Mayo first base, Basallo DHing against a lot of those righties. Now, the other thing you could do is play Adley a little bit less. And we saw that Monday night as well. Not only was Adley not catching, he did not play in the game at all. And it's twofold, right? This is a good chance to maybe get Adley a little more rest down the stretch and not have to catch every day. You know, maybe when Basallo does catch like Monday, Adley just sits instead of being the DH. That opens more space for other guys. Alex Jackson is still on this team as a third catcher. He's going to start every once in a while down the stretch, and they're probably just going to release Gary Sanchez when he's healthy and come back. He's probably not going to join into the equation. But Alex Jackson, they're going to try to figure out this role, because I do think when both Adley and Basallo are on the opening day roster next year, they're still going to want to carry a third catcher, and it could absolutely be Alex Jackson with how good he's been. Because when you have your two catchers in the lineup almost every day with Adley and Basallo, Adley catching, Basallo DHing or first base, you really want a third catcher on the team, because, if Adley gets hurt and Basallo's DHing, you don't want to have to keep burning the DH and putting your pitcher in the lineup. It's really good to have a third catcher on the roster. So he might play a little bit, but you don't want to sit Adley too much, because even though he's been better since coming off the IL with the oblique injury, you want him to finally get in a groove for the first time, an extended groove since the first half of 2024. You want to play him enough to finish his season strong going into next year. That's important for him as well. But you also don't want to just fully sit Mountcastle against righties, because I think you want to showcase him a little bit. You want him, who had a really bad year that had the hamstring injury, right? He's swinging the bat super well right now. You don't want to fully sit him when he's red hot. And you don't want to have him lose any value, because, Mountcastle's got one more year. I don't know how he really fits into this team next year. I think the Orioles would be happy to trade him away and try to add to their team in different places on the mound. But you want to be able to showcase Mountcastle a little bit if that's the case. If he just is a platoon player for the final 6 weeks and only plays against lefties and pinch hits and hits okay, I'm not sure another team's going to want him in a trade, and the Orioles might just end up non-tendering him and losing him for nothing. If you can find a way to play Mountcastle a little bit more, he can hit close to what he's been doing since coming off the injured list, somebody's going to want him, right? A team traded something for Andrew Vaughn, who was sitting in AAA earlier this year, right? The White Sox got a rental starting pitcher who was solid. Could the Orioles get that for Mountcastle? Probably not, but at the very least, they could get a solid reliever who's got 1 year left, and that's better than just non-tendering him and losing him for nothing. So if Mountcastle can play enough down the stretch to show that he's still got value, and we know the bat speed is there, we know he can hit the ball hard, like he's a reclamation type project, he's 28 years old, but you got to play him enough for a team to be willing to give up something. And that's kind of the conundrum here. I do think it's going to be Mountcastle seeing the lowest share of those four in the playing time, just the way that Mancelino has talked about it. They're going to still catch Basallo. I'm not really sure how much they get Alex Jackson in there, but every once in a while he will play. It is going to be really, really interesting. But I do think at the end of the day, I want Mayo and Basallo to get as many at-bats as possible. And I want Adley getting into a groove, and that really does leave Mountcastle as the odd man out. And it's only going to get tougher because we got our first positive injury update on Tyler O'Neill on Monday, right? He's been out with that wrist issue. He started throwing. He resumed baseball activities for the first time on Monday. And it's probably going to be early September for O'Neill. Now, when he comes back, there will be an extra roster spot, but you don't get an extra lineup spot. And O'Neill, he'll probably mostly play outfield, but you can't just have him play the outfield every day with his injuries. Like, he's going to DH a little bit. And so even if it's not every day, you're throwing some of those O'Neill DH games into this mix as well, which makes it even harder. Problem, but a good problem right now for Elias and Tony Mancelino to have. And I'm interested to see how they play it out. I hope Basallo and Mayo can get as many at-bats as possible to get them ready to be a full go for the O's in 2026. And if they're hitting like this, especially Basallo, just put him in that lineup every day and just watch him cook. It could be a really, really fun final 6 weeks for Basallo and Beavers. Again, I don't want to get ahead of myself. It's been 2 and 3 games, but it's been an awesome 2 and 3 games for those two guys. And they helped the Orioles win again on Monday night. And hopefully they can help them win another one and sweep this quick 2-game series when they take on the Red Sox again on Tuesday night. 7:10 Eastern time start on Tuesday. It'll be Tomoyuki Sugano going for the Orioles. He's been much better as of late. Last 2 starts has given up just a total of 2 earned runs. And he'll go up against the veteran right-hander Walker Buehler, the 31-year-old who signed that 1-year deal with the Red Sox this offseason. Hasn't gone great. He's got a 5.43 ERA in 21 starts, gave up 4 runs his last time out. He might be pitching for his rotation job every night right now. So we'll see if the O's can jump on. And then I'll be back on Wednesday recapping everything you need to know in the game between the Orioles and the Red Sox. We'll get you further updates on Jordan Westburg, talk a little bit about how this Orioles roster is shaping out. We'll talk about some minor league news as well. Albert Suarez, Kyle Bradish getting a lot closer to returning for the O's. Some interesting promotions like Carter Baumler, some things Chase McDermott is doing in the minor leagues. We'll talk about all that on Wednesday's episode. And then we'll talk about it a little more tomorrow, but I think there's going to be another live mailbag episode right here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel on Wednesday evening, probably around 8 or 8:30 p.m. So make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles podcast on YouTube. Get notified when we go live. Most likely, it seems like with a live mailbag on Wednesday. So email your questions to lockedonorioles@gmail.com or jump in live Wednesday night for those questions as well. But there still will be a Wednesday morning episode, and I'll be back for that one. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.